Welcome back to Operation Evil. I'm your host, Nyoka.
And I am your co-host, Megan.
And we have Mandi here again.
I'm back.
She's back. Let's just hop right on in. Let's just do it.
I'm Tammy Zamficki. I was able to attend a big part of this trial, and so my first comment will be to address what I felt the defendant's behavior was. I felt she was shameful during the trial. It was apparent to me and others that the defendant did not take the proceedings in this courtroom seriously. It was extremely disrespectful to watch, especially during some of the most sensitive and heartbreaking testimony.
All right, so we're starting in on episode, whatever the number is.
120.
120.
Woo-hoo.
And this is part 2 of the Doomsday cult mom, Lori Vallow Daybell. We have Mandi with us, and where we left off in the first part of this was on May 24th, 2021, a grand jury indicted both Lori and Chad on several felony charges that included first-degree murder for the deaths of JJ and Tylee and conspiracy to commit murder. And then with Chad, the charges were murdering his wife as well, Tammy Daybell. On June 8th, 2021, Lori Vallow Daybell was committed to the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare, where a psychologist deemed her unfit for trial. June 8th. June 9th, 2021, Chad Daybell pleaded not guilty to all charges in his indictment. His children attended this meeting. June 24th, 2021, a grand jury in Arizona indicted Lori for conspiracy to commit murder in the death of her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. The Arizona proceedings are on hold while she faces her charges in Idaho. I do have a picture, Nyoka, that you can place on the interweb of her standing there during her trial. July 29th, 2021, prosecutors dropped the destruction, alteration, and concealment of evidence charges against Chad and Lori. August 5th, 2021, prosecutors said they will seek the death penalty against Chad, stating, quote, "The nature and magnitude of these crimes warrant the possibility of the highest possible punishment," end quote. And I have a picture of Chad Daybell and his attorney, John Pryor, that you can place on the interweb. September 2021, Chad and Tammy Daybell's children spoke publicly for the first time, and they told 48 Hours that they believe their father is innocent. Daybell's daughter, Emma, says she believes Chad was framed by Alex Cox, which was Lori's now deceased brother, and Lori. There's a picture of the kids, if you want to include that on the interweb. October 5th, 2021, the Daybell trial was moved from Fremont County to Ada County. Now, the reason why there's so many changes of venue here is probably due to the fact that maybe like they needed to get a jury that wasn't biased here. So just throwing that out there. Yeah, good luck. December 28th, 2021, Judge Boyce ordered that Mark Means, Lori's attorney, can no longer represent her. He cited a conflict of interest in representing both Daybells, which he should have known better, as well as concerns about his legal competency. So I didn't dig into the legal competency part, but you cannot represent both parties. That's like me going to a child's case with the person that I'm trying to get like a visitation agreement with and having the same attorney. You can't do that. March 21st, 2022, John Pryor, Chad's attorney, requested to sever Chad's case from Lori's, but it was denied. On April 11th, 2022, Judge Boyce issued a written order that Lori was now competent for trial, and so they proceeded. She was ordered to be released from the health and welfare facility, and her arraignment was set for April 19th. April 19th, her arraignment. Lori attended her arraignment. She did not speak, and her attorney, Jim Archibald, pleaded not guilty on her behalf. Lori and Chad were both at the courthouse in eastern Idaho for court proceedings. Lori was there for her arraignment that was delayed for months while she underwent the treatment at the mental health facility, and Chad for a hearing over the trial venue. Again, the venues change a couple times. May 2nd, 2022, prosecutors announced they would pursue the death penalty against Lori. It was later ruled off the table by Boyce, and we'll get to that in a second. May 4th, 2022, Lori Vallow Daybell They kept calling her that also. And then once we get closer to the most recent, she takes away the Vallow part and she like stands her ground that just call me Lori Daybell. But anyways, Lori Vallow Daybell will qualify for capital punishment, meaning, of course, she'll face the death penalty, if she is convicted at her trial because the slayings were exceptionally depraved and carried out for financial gain. And that was according to court documents filed by the prosecuting attorneys. May 26th, 2022, Judge Boyce announced the trials would be held together in January 2023. August 2022, Lori appeared in court and photos were taken of her smiling and wearing a band on her ring finger. Side note here, I watched the courtroom footage before they banned it, and there are a few interviews circulating the interweb of psychiatrists ripping her apart for her demeanor. I highly suggest checking it out. August 16th, 2022, Lori's attorneys seek change in charges. Attorneys for Lori asked the judge to send the case back to a grand jury because they say that the conspiracy charges are oddly constructed and could confuse a jury. Lori and Chad have pleaded not guilty to murder, conspiracy, and grand theft charges in connection with the deaths of 7-year-old JJ. He was actually 6. And 17, or I'm sorry, he was 7. She was actually 16 years old, Tylee Ryan. One thing I want to say about that, the grand theft charges have to do with the Social Security benefits, just so you all are aware. September 23rd, 2022, Judge Boyce has banned cameras from the courtroom in the criminal case of Lori Vallow Daybell and Chad Daybell, saying he fears the images could prevent a fair trial. The Idaho judge said news organizations will no longer be able to shoot still photography or videos inside the courtroom. October 6, 2022, Lori's case was put on hold due to competency issues. A month later, Lori was found competent for trial, but it was postponed to April 3rd, 2023. January 7th, 2023, Judge Boyce rejected a request from Lori's attorney that she and her husband be allowed to meet in person and on the phone to discuss strategies and settlement options. Attorneys for Lori and Chad Daybell presented several requests during a motion hearing, including that the trial be delayed until 2024, which was a request from Chad's attorney, and that the death penalty be taken off the table, which was a request from Lori's attorney. March 21st, 2023, Judge Boyce ruled that Lori and Chad's cases would be separated after new evidence was submitted. Lori would appear at trial on April 3rd. Judge Boyce grants a motion to take the death penalty off the table per Lori's attorney's motion. How? The judge said the main reason was due to a large amount of evidence that her team does not have time to go through before the trial. Apparently, she never waived her right to a speedy trial. And what that means is she's agreeing to the proceeding moving slower than the law provides, which gives the defense more time to prepare for a case. And you have that right. Chad Daybell's trial has not yet been scheduled, and the death penalty still applied to his case at this time. April 3rd through 7th, 2023, attorneys began selecting 18 potential jurors for the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell, charged in what prosecutors say was a doomsday-focused plot. Again, you hear that cult-like concept. Authorities summoned 1,800 potential jurors to the courthouse in late March, requiring each of them to complete a 20-page questionnaire.
Oh my gosh.
In hopes of winnowing out anyone unable to fairly try the case. Ultimately, 12 jurors and 6 alternates are hearing the case, and her jury was finalized. April 10th, 2023, opening arguments in Lori's murder trial were given to a jury in Boise, Idaho. Prosecutors said Lori used money, power, and sex to get exactly what she wanted, whereas Lori's attorneys painted a picture of her as a caring mother with strong religious beliefs.
Yes.
April
sounds like a
11th.
caring mother.
Yeah. April 11th, 2023, a Rexburg police detective took the stand. Jurors were shown graphic photos of the dead children to the point that Lori's attorney requested she leaves for her own mental health. Judge Boyce rejected the request, saying her presence in the courtroom was needed to ensure a fair trial for all involved. April 12th, 2023, day 8 of Lori's murder trial ended abruptly due to a death in the prosecution's family. But before it ended, the Rexburg police detective was examined by John Thomas, and a phone call between Lori and Chad was played for the jurors. April 13th, 2023, on day 9 of Lori Vallow's murder trial, Lori's bestie, Gibb, if you remember her, took the stand. She talked of possession and castings and the first time Lori met Chad. A detective played the court a patriarchal blessing given to Cox by Chad, and a phone call Chad made to a mortuary right after Charles's death. They also talked about Charles confronting Lori about her affair. April 14th, 2023, day 10 of Lori's murder trial included information that Lori found out after Charles's death that she was not his beneficiary, and testimony from Cox's wife, Lori's sister-in-law, about Charles's possession. April 18th, 2023, Lori's murder trial continued with day 11 after a brief break for events for the death in the prosecution's family. On day 11, Lori's sister-in-law, that would be Zalima, testified that Cox wouldn't make a decision without Lori and Chad. And a heartbreaking conversation between Lori and her son Colby Ryan is played for the court. Several witnesses reviewed Lori's use of money, including suspicious activity. April 19th, 2023, officials continue their review of Lori, Chad, and Cox's money usage, as well as more information on the Social Security benefits of Tylee and JJ. The court also interviewed several detectives involved in reviewing Charles's death, including some testimony on discrepancies in information given to them about Charles's death. April 20th, 2023, the court reviewed the day Charles died. Side note, this body cam footage is on the interweb, so I highly suggest watching it to see her demeanor for yourself again. The court also reviewed how Lori allegedly stopped responding to JJ's babysitter and that Tylee and JJ were not in school, as well as jarring new details of the weekend JJ allegedly died. April 24th, 2023, audio is released of the first time Lori lied to officers about JJ's location during a wellness check. April 25th, 2023, Lori's sister Summer Shiflett testified, and a phone call is played between Lori and Shiflett after JJ and Tylee's remains were discovered. Quote, "You threw them away like garbage," end quote, Shiflett said. April 26th, 2023, JJ and Tylee's cause of death is released by a forensic pathologist. JJ's cause of death was asphyxiation.
We caught it.
And Tylee's cause of death was homicide by unspecified means.
How do they understand that it's homicide if the means are unspecified? Because I thought the means kind of links to whether it was homicide, accidental, suicide.
Yeah, well, and that's a manner of death too. So I don't know how they incorporated that in the actual trial itself. I didn't look that up, but it's enough to say.
I think
they
we
were
know
killed.
what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were, they're predictable.
Very. April 27th, it was revealed that Lori's DNA and Cox's prints were found at the crime scene. April 28th, 2023, the court discussed pink foam found in Tammy's mouth when she died. May 1st, 2023, more discussion on Tammy's cause of death, all included in this timeline, which, if you recall, was asphyxiation. May 2nd, 2023, a podcast that Lori is a guest on is discussed. The podcast reportedly shows that Tammy was a good mother, as it discussed her taking care of her children and taking them away from an abusive father, who, by the way, died of a heart attack.
Right.
Okay. May 3rd, 2023, the court discussed the day that someone tried to shoot Tammy, including the search history of Cox. He reportedly searched several AR-15 related searches leading up to it. May 4th, 2023, it would have been Tammy's 53rd birthday if she was still alive. More on Tammy's insurance being changed right before she died. May 5th, the court reviewed several text messages between Chad and Lori, as well as Lori and others relating to the case. More of the same romantic messages between Chad and Lori. May 6th, 2023, more romantic texts between Lori and Chad are revealed. May 8th, additional text messages from Lori, Cox, and Chad are revealed, including text messages about eliminating zombies and romantic texts between Lori and Chad. May 9th, 2023, the prosecution announced that they have concluded their arguments and the defense followed suit. Concluding arguments started May 11th. May 12th, a 12-member jury unanimously finds Lori guilty on all charges. The jury deliberated for 7 hours. You will now hear the audio of the actual verdict read by the jury.
For the County of Fremont, State of Idaho plaintiff versus Lori Noreen Vallow, aka Lori Noreen Daybell, defendant, case number CR 22211624. Verdict. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn to try the above entitled action, for our verdict, unanimously answer the questions submitted to us as follows. Question number 1. In regards to count 1 of the amended indictment, is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tylee Ryan and grand theft by deception? Answer, guilty. Question number 2. In regards to count 2 of the amended indictment, is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of first-degree murder of Tylee Ryan? Answer, guilty. Question number 3. In regards to count 3 of the amended indictment, is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow and grand theft by deception? Guilty. Question number 4. In regards to count 4, the amended indictment, is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of first-degree murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow? Answer, guilty. Question number 5. In regards to count 5 of the amended indictment, is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tammy Daybell? Answer, guilty. Question number 6. In regards to count 7 of the amended indictment, is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of grand theft? Answer, guilty. Dated this 12th day of May, 2023, signed by the presiding officer.
There's also a picture of her, Nyoka, that where she is standing there while the verdict is being read. It's her face. Larry and Kay Woodcock, if you recall, are JJ's biological grandparents. They were present at the courthouse following Lori's guilty verdict. As they left the courthouse, the crowd sang JJ's favorite song, which was "We Will Rock You" by Queen.
Aw.
Oh, my heart.
I know. Kay said there was a part of them that doubted Lori would be guilty on all charges. She said the universe aligned for the verdict to be read on the Friday before Mother's Day, providing what she called poetic justice. She stated, quote, "Just the sadness, but the relief from all this is a liberating feeling. It's just free for us," end quote. While speaking with reporters, Larry Woodcock choked back tears while sharing heartfelt messages of love to the 3 victims, holding up his arm that had the 3 rubber wristbands representing the victims. He also had a shirt on that said "World's Greatest Grandpa," by the way. Larry stated, quote, "My heart hurts for these 3. This is what this has been all about from the very get-go. It started with 2 children missing. I stood up and said, 'Where are the children? Where are the children? Where are the children? Give us back our children,' end quote." June 2nd, 2023, a trial date is set for Chad. Chad will face trial nearly a year after his wife. Judge Boyce, who is overseeing both cases, set his trial date for April 1st, 2024. He too will be tried at the Ada County Courthouse in Boise, Idaho. July 31st, 2023, Lori is sentenced to 5 life sentences in prison, only 3 of which will run consecutively. Judge Boyce denied her any chance of parole. This was the maximum penalty on the charges of murder and conspiracy to commit murder. She was also given a 10-year sentence for grand theft, as well as ordered to pay more than $50,000, including fines, a civil penalty for each of the 3 victims, and restitution. Victims spoke at the sentencing, which included the 5 family members. It was Samantha Gwilliam, who is Tammy Daybell's sister, Ronald Douglas, who is Tammy's father, Vicky Hoban, which you heard at the very beginning of this, which is Tammy's aunt, Kay Woodcock, which is JJ's grandmother, and Colby Ryan, Ty Lee, and JJ's older brother. During victim impact statements, Lori sat leaning in her chair, looking down or toward the wall closest to her. The only time she showed emotion was when Kay Woodcock, who is JJ's grandmother, spoke of the circumstances behind the child's birth. The court first heard from Samantha Gwilliam, Tammy Daybell's sister. She began by reading a statement by her father, Ronald Douglas, before giving her own statement. Both remarked on the quick nature of Chad Daybell's marriage to Lori after Tammy's death and how unsettling it was. Douglas wrote, quote, "The eternal ramifications of her actions are yet to be calculated. Lori needs to pay for her actions according to the laws of mortals. She will still answer to the laws of God when she passes from this life," end quote. Gwilliam went on to say she had begun researching Lori shortly after her marriage to Chad and found nothing but lies. This included her alleged name, the number of husbands she had, and that she had children. Gwilliam said that Tammy Daybell had been healthy up to 2 weeks before her death. She said she and her family were overwhelmed to find out what they knew in their hearts all along, that Lori had planned her murders just as she did her children. Why plan something so heinous? She spoke directly to Lori and said the following regarding her and Chad, quote, "You are not exalted beings, and your behavior makes you ineligible to be one," end quote. Gwilliam said that Lori's actions were partly due to the fact that Lori wanted money and said Chad was unremarkable and didn't have money. Gwilliam stated, quote, "You could have easily divorced your spouses and made your own perverted life together, but you need money. You are a liar, adulteress, and a murderer," end quote. She went on to discuss how their mother had passed away from cancer shortly after Lori Daybell's guilty verdict. Quote, "Your trial was the last thing my ailing mother had to live through. She declined in health as she heard through news reports all the horrible things that happened. And she had to relive all the things we have tried to forget the last 4 years. My mother passed away in June knowing that you will never come out of prison again," end quote. Vicky Hoban, Tammy Daybell's aunt, you heard at the start of this episode, claimed Lori's actions during court proceedings were shameful and she didn't take them seriously based on her demeanor. Hoban described Tammy as loved by the community at large. She said she was a teacher and loved her job. Hoban claimed on the night of Friday, October 18th, 2019, she imagined Tammy was tired from a hard day at work and was most likely only worried about getting a good night's sleep. Hoban stated, quote, "Instead of getting a good night's sleep, she was brutally executed in her own bed. She was taken from us by murdering thieves. Tammy was robbed of her entire life and all of her family robbed of ever seeing her again," end quote. She went on to describe all the things Tammy would miss, including the simple things in life, like smelling the rain, growing a garden. She said Lori had a shameful reputation with Tammy's husband, Chad, and had turned her home into a funeral home. Quote, "Tammy would have been horrified to know what you have done," end quote. Hoban then spoke directly to Lori, stating, quote, "You are now going to pay the price. A bet never sufficient in this life. It's all we can do. I hope the life you live is filled with fear and that every day you are terrified. The way beautiful Ty Lee lived in fear for hers and sweet JJ as you continue terrifying them by saying they would be zombies," end quote. She then explained that her granddaughter had been a good friend of Ty Lee and how their group of friends were stuck in their grief and sadness over the death of their friend and at the hands of their own mother. Kay Woodcock, JJ's grandmother, spoke next. She began her statement with a string of numbers. She went on to explain how what she would call Lori's campaign of terror had affected her and her family. She explained the numbers represented days involved in the court cases and the days in her life affected by Lori's actions, including the day her brother Charles Vallow was murdered. In addition, she described that 0 represented how she and her family firmly believe that she has 0 mental illness that drove her to commit these heinous acts. Rather, she is driven by her greed and needs to be the center of attention. Kay Woodcock said that she knew Charles's death was the start of her intense fear for JJ's safety. She said she also realized Lori did it so she could carry on her illicit affair with Chad Daybell. Kay stated, quote, "I now realize what a nothing Chad Daybell is, a man with no ability to support anyone, no success of his own, a user of the weak-minded, a lazy, good-for-nothing, spineless man that rode his wife's coattails of success," end quote. Kay Woodcock said Lori did everything she did because of greed. She then explained the details surrounding JJ's birth. He was the biological son of Woodcock's son Todd and was born prematurely. She expressed her tender feeling for the child along with the feelings for her son that she felt. She then talked about how she and her husband had taken on parenting JJ when he was 9 months old. Lori and Charles had adopted him. She said Lori was a wonderful blessing to take care of JJ. She also said they knew he would have far better opportunities with her and Charles. But though Lori always expressed her deep appreciation for allowing her to raise JJ, it was just mind-boggling how that same mother could murder that same child. Kay Woodcock said she remembered JJ for the joy he exuded and how all she had were memories to feel the love. She spoke of meeting Ty Lee and how she was an adorable child and how she and JJ had a bond that was incredible. Then she reminded the court the last picture known of Ty Lee and JJ, where they are hugging and grinning, and how that encompassed their relationship. She claimed it was a haunting reminder, as it was a photo taken shortly before and by the defendant hours before she murdered her own child. She concluded her statement with, quote, "And finally, the number one for the defendant, the person that will never matter again once we walk out the door," end quote. The final statement was a brief statement read by the prosecuting attorney Wood from Ty Lee and JJ's older brother, Colby Ryan. He expressed sadness over the finality of his brother and sister never being able to fulfill their lives. He also said he regrets that his own family would never know their aunt and uncle and even grandmother, referring to Lori. Colby wrote, quote, "I've lost my entire family in life. I lost the opportunity to share life with the people I love the most. I've watched everything crumble and be shredded to pieces. I have lost my sister, brother, father, and my mother," end quote. Lori also gave her own statement in which she quoted scripture and spoke about her dead children as if they approved of her. Lori began her statement with quotes from the Gospel of John in the Bible. At this point in time, please play the audio from her sentencing where she actually speaks.
I would like to start by quoting John from the New Testament in the Bible. In John chapter 8, verse 7, Jesus says, "He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her." Then in verse 15, Jesus says, "Ye judge after the flesh, I judge no man. And yet if I judge, my judgment is true." Jesus knows me. And Jesus understands me. I mourn with all of you who mourn my children and Tammy. Jesus Christ knows the truth of what happened here. Jesus Christ knows that no one was murdered in this case. Accidental deaths happen. Suicides happen. Fatal side effects from medications happen. I have a different perspective in life because in 2002, when I was pregnant with Tylee, I died in the hospital while in labor with her. They tried to stop my labor. They put me on the table and they put something in my IV, and I felt my spirit falling to the floor. I was standing near my pregnant body, watching the doctors try to revive me, which took them a few minutes. In that time, my sister Stacy was standing to my left. I turned to hug her and was surprised that her spirit was as tangible as a physical body, because I knew I was in spirit and she was in spirit. She said she needed to show me some things, and we went to heaven. I later returned to my body. Because of this experience, I have access to heaven and the spirit world. Since then, I have had many communications from people now living in heaven, including my children, Tylee Ashlyn and Joshua Jackson, my sisters, Stacy and Lolly, my aunts and my uncles, and my grandparents. I have had many communications with Jesus Christ, the Savior of this world, and our heavenly parents. I have had many angelic visitors have come and communicated with me and even manifested themselves to me. Because of these communications, I know for a fact that my children are happy and busy in the spirit world. Because of my communications with my friend Tammy Daybell, I know that she is also very happy and extremely busy. I have always mourned the loss of my loved ones, and I have lost many in this mortal world. However, I know them more than most people. I know where they are now and what they're doing. I know how wonderful heaven is, and I'm homesick for it every single day. I know we all lived in heaven before we were born on earth, and we were all adult spirits in the heavenly realm. We chose to come to earth as mortals. Heaven is more wonderful than you can possibly imagine. I do not fear death, but I look forward to it. I did not want to return to my body when I was out of it. Even though my son Colby, who I adored more than anything, was only 6 years old at the time, and I was about to give birth to this new baby girl that I wanted so badly. I was a young mother, and you would think I wouldn't want to leave my children, but as I stood in heaven, I did not want to go back. I thought they would be fine without me, because I was peaceful and I was happy and I was home. But then I was told by Jesus that I needed to go back and complete things that I had covenanted or promised to do before I was born. This caused me a lot of distress because I knew heaven was my real home, and I only wanted to be there. I was free from pain, emotional and physical. But then I was shown how I would help my children and others in the future. So ultimately, I did agree to go back to my body. Tylee has visited me. She is happy and very busy. Tylee is free now from all the pains of her life. Tylee suffered horrible physical pain her whole life. I sat with Tylee in the hospital year after year after year while she screamed in pain when the morphine wasn't even enough to take away the pain of her pancreatitis. I sat there while she cried, and I held back her hair while she threw up. And I am the only person on this earth who knows how much Tylee suffered in her life. She had pain every single day. She never felt good. Her body did not work right. And I don't know if that was from complications from me dying while she was being born or something else, but she had a very difficult life. She was sexually abused by her own biological father since she was 3 years old, and she was forced by family court to go visit him for 10 years against her will. I fought for her. In court, I protected her. I tried to protect her with my whole life. I tried to protect her. I worried about her every single day. Tylee had to get her GED because she couldn't go to school every day because she never felt good. She felt sick. Nobody knows this because Tylee, like myself, tries to put on a good front, tries to be a happy person, tries to have hope in life, tries to know that she's here for a purpose and that she has an eternal purpose to be on this earth. But I never stopped worrying about her. One of the times that Tylee came to me as a spirit after she died, she commanded me, and she said to me, "Stop worrying, Mom. We are fine." She knows how I worry and how I miss her. The first time JJ visited me after he passed away, he put his arm around me and he said to me, "You didn't do anything wrong, Mom. I love you, and I know you loved me every minute of my life." JJ, Joshua Jackson, was an adult spirit, and he was very, very tall when he put his arm around me. He is busy, he is engaged, he has jobs that he does there, and he is happy where he is. His life was short, but JJ's life was meaningful. JJ was a wonderful person and touched the lives of everyone, and I adored him every minute of his life. My eternal friend, Tammy Daybell, has visited me on several occasions. She came to bring me peace and comfort, and I know that she is extremely busy helping her family, especially her children and grandchildren. And I have a great love for Tammy. My beautiful children, Tylee Ashlyn and Joshua Jackson, rest safely this day in the arms of Jesus. My wonderful friend, Tammy Daybell, rests safely this day in the arms of Jesus. And I look forward to the day when we are all reunited and I too will rest with them in the arms of my Jesus.
So now you just heard the actual audio of Lori speaking at her sentencing. Judge Boyce stated, quote, "You had so many other options. You could have gotten divorced. You could have found someone else to take care of those kids. And as the state was able to prove at trial, you chose the most evil and destructive path possible. You justified all of this by going down a bizarre religious rabbit hole. And clearly you are still down there," end quote. October 6, 2023, Lori filed an appeal, citing in part statements by defense experts claiming she was not competent to stand trial and should return to the mental hospital where she had previously spent 10 months before the trial. December 7th, 2023, Lori made an initial court appearance in Arizona and pleaded not guilty to 2 counts of conspiracy to commit murder. The charges in Arizona are in connection to the deaths of her estranged husband, Charles Vallow, and her niece's ex-husband, Brandon Boudreaux. If you recall from the last episode in 2019, Alex Cox, Lori's brother, and Chad tried to shoot Brandon near his home. He was unharmed, and the charges were on hold until the conclusion of the Idaho trial, and the court entered pleas of not guilty for both charges. April 1st, 2024, the jury was selected for Chad's trial, which is expected to begin that week and last about 10 weeks. He was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder in connection to the deaths of his wife, Tammy, and Lori's children, JJ and Tylee. On May 30th, 2024, Daybell was convicted of first-degree murder of his wife, Tammy Daybell, and 2 of the children, Joshua, which was JJ, and Tylee Ryan, as well as for conspiracy in the murders and of insurance fraud. Chad Daybell was sentenced to death on June 1st, 2024, nearly a year after his second wife, Lori Vallow Daybell, was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. January 10th, 2025, brings you up to now, brings you up to today, brings you up to speed. Lori represented herself as a pro se defendant during her first court appearance in Arizona's Maricopa County Court. There is another bit of audio. She gives her reasoning to represent herself.
Can you just tell me a little bit why you want to represent yourself?
Yes, Your Honor, for the past 5 years that I've been incarcerated, I have taken upon myself to study case law and criminal rules of procedure in the state of Idaho and Arizona, as well as federally. Prior to that, for the last 10 years, prior to my incarceration, I did study procedure in family law, and I have real trial experience. I have participated in 3 different full trials from beginning to end.
So you just heard the audio from Lori's pro se defense. Lori is charged with the murder of her husband, Charles Vallow, and the attempted murder of her niece's ex-husband, Brandon Boudreau. She will first stand trial for the murder of Charles Vallow, and a second trial will be held for the case involving the attempted murder of Mr. Boudreau. Jury selection in Arizona is set for March 31st, 2025. So we should have an update on this pretty soon. Lori came into the courtroom smiling. She announced herself as Lori Daybell because they were originally, like I said, calling her Lori Vallow Daybell. She corrected them. She told the judge that's her legal name, and the judge said they would update the cases, calling her Lori Daybell, formerly known as Lori Vallow. During the hearing, Lori pushed for the judge to order the state to turn over extradition records from when Maricopa County Sheriff's Office brought her from Idaho to Arizona in 2023. The judge questioned why this would be relevant to the charges she's facing, which include the indictments from 2021 and 2022. The prosecutor stated they didn't intend to use any of the extradition records during trial. She also filed 2 new motions with the court and expressed challenges with receiving orders and replies in jail. She told the judge she intends to move forward with her case without any delays. Lori's mother and sister were in the courtroom on that morning and said that they didn't have any comments about the hearing. Jury selection for the first trial is scheduled to start in March. And I believe, like I said, it was March 31st, 2025. So we should have an update pretty soon here, considering it's already almost February. So
You have to mark your
concludes-
calendar.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
That concludes this second part of this. But now I want to turn it over to Mandi. And well, first of all, I guess I should ask you guys if you have any questions. And then I plan on turning it over to Mandi to talk about the cult aspect of this, of the past 2 episodes, essentially.
No, I just can't wait till we get like the ending, I guess, of it. So we're gonna have to really watch it. So if you guys see it or whatever, let's get everybody updated when that comes out.
And considering
Yeah.
this was like on a national level too.
Mhm.
I mean, everybody that's listening should probably see the update come across the news. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
that's how I found this essentially. Like that's how I was like, wow, this is back in the news. Let's talk about this.
Yeah, where I'm out of the country for so much and for so long, I don't keep up with the United States news, but I do remember this case because I left out of the States in 2019, 2020. But if anybody out there catches this before I do, please let me know because I need some finality to this as well.
Right.
Absolutely. I can't wait to
Just-
hear about the cult aspect of it. I love cult things. I'm here for it.
And that's totally why I reached out because like I said, I had to listen to your guys' episodes all the way from the start just so I got like I knew you a little bit better because I know Megan.
Mhm.
And I knew your backgrounds and what you had gone and I heard you several times say that you love cults and I
I
was like,
do.
man, I could totally dive into like I'm not a professional in the cult psychology side of it, but it's one of the things that I did go down a rabbit hole and I looked into.
I love that.
So did you guys want to go ahead and start
Yeah,
with
let's
that
hop
part
on
of it?
in.
Let's do it.
Yes.
Okay. I did want to skip back a little bit though. I felt really bad trying to jump in on top of Megan, but I wanted to talk about a little bit of Lori's mental health and her competency because you had stated twice that she was put up to assess whether she was fit or competent to stand trial.
Mhm.
And a lot of people don't really understand what that means. And I didn't either until I dove into that. And so kind of what competency is a required legal standard that determines if the defendant is able to participate in their own defense, meaning their ability to understand the proceedings, to understand the gravity of what's going on, and to coherently work with their lawyer. But just because somebody is diagnosed with a mental health disorder doesn't necessarily mean they're automatically not competent to stand trial. You can have a mental health disorder and still understand everything that's going around with you, be in touch with reality, understand the gravity.
I'm glad that
So,
you cleared that up because that's so true. I never thought of it that way.
yeah. So what
Mhm.
will happen is a judge will review evidence from mental health experts to determine if the person does have a mental health diagnosis, if that diagnosis inhibits the person's ability to, work with their lawyer, express choices. And at the time of the crime, they were aware of what they were doing was wrong. And that's one of the big ones. And so those two times that they challenged Lori's competency to stand trial, the one time I think it was almost immediate that, yeah, she's competent to stand trial. And then the second time, Megan had mentioned she spent 10 months in a mental health facility. So if a person is found not competent to stand trial, the proceeding may be postponed in order to send them to a mental health facility like Lori did to restore her competency, which means maybe she just needs a little more education. She needs to work on a little bit of mental health stuff. And they're like, yeah, now she's good to stand trial. So after those 10 months, they said, yeah, she's competent to stand trial. So during this whole case, what I was really trying to figure out and what I kind of at first was like questioning Megan about is because everybody called this a cult thing. She was the Doomsday cult. And so I was like, I don't think this is a cult thing, but the more I listened to Megan, the more things did kind of fit into a cult. So I wanted to talk about both the cult aspect and the mental health aspect. What I'm trying to figure out, did she really have some pretty severe mental health problems? Was she really the leader of a cult, or was this religious fanaticism? I'll explain that a little bit more here in a couple minutes. Chad, I looked back into him quite a bit trying to find any mental health stuff. Wasn't a whole lot I could find out with him. Megan talked about he was born and raised in a Mormon family. He wrote a lot of books that were considered religious themes. And then as those books kind of went along, uh, he got a little bit deeper and a little bit off track. And then Megan had also mentioned the LDS church had talked about how they completely stood against the fact, hey, he's not doing anything that represents us at all. Again, I'm not a professional in religion, so I don't want anybody to think that, I'm talking bad or disrespecting any religion or disrespecting the LDS. Religion is great if that's your thing. Doomsday prepping is great if that's your thing. And religion and doomsday prepping only really becomes a problem when it becomes extreme or fanaticized. And that's the same with just about anything. It's all great as long as you're not hurting anybody, it's not affecting anyone, and it's not inhibiting your life in any way. And so it appears that the more that Chad kind of got into the LDS religion and kept going deeper and deeper is when he more started to deviate from it. So that's when he started talking about all this stuff that Megan explained, where he was prophesizing the world ending and people were possessed and that they had shades of darkness, being one end you're closer to God and the other end you're closer to Satan. So yeah, I got a little off track there, but fanaticism. Everybody wants to know what is religious fanaticism. So it's kind of when somebody becomes so completely engrossed or aggressively obsessed with something, it's typically a belief. So fanaticism, everybody believes, is really bad. And in some cases, it's not. Fanaticism can be great. Dr. Martin Luther King was considered a civil rights fanatic. And that ended up being an awesome thing, right? He did something good with being a fanatic of what he believed in and what he stood for. And that's great. But when you believe and you stand for something as, I'm sorry, wild and crazy as Chad and Lori, and that's bad. So extremism is the next step that really starts taking things a little bit too far. And it starts, like I said, inhibiting your life and those around you. And some even may start creating delusional religious ideas. And we see that a lot with Chad and Lori. So again, however mainstream society considered the LDS as a cult, LDS says that, they do not teach anything that Chad stood for. And from what I understand, I kind of believe that too. Chad and Lori both went way so far beyond anything that the Mormon religion teaches that it can't even be associated with the Mormon religion anymore. An article by Penn State explained that even traditional Mormons like the LDS community seek truth by offering its followers a roadmap for their place in the religion and their beliefs and kind of something that they should be following, along with an ethical and moral code. And they do accept that the beliefs and rituals of members are of the religion. But again, FBI even says, based on their explanations, that the LDS and the Mormon religion does not fall under a cult. So this is where I kind of started like doubting what Megan was saying about the cult, because I was like, man, it sounds way more like religious extremism, religious fanaticism. But the more Lori and Chad kept spiraling and going further and further and further was where I was getting really confused. And then Megan started talking about, so she believed that she was a deity destined to play a role in the upcoming apocalypse, and her family was getting in the way of that mission. She tried to convince some of her closest friends, possibly even I think his name Cox, to follow them, join them, work with them, and that's kind of what a cult does, right? They have one strong leader that tries to, convince, manipulate, coerce people to follow him. So there's one little tick in the cult box. Yay for Megan.
Mandy, you say that, but I'm starting to think, was she the driving force behind it, or was Chad?
Oh, I'm getting there.
Okay.
Yeah. See, I'm wavering on all sides too.
Okay.
So to go on with the cult theme of it, they had all of these special little names for each other, all these nicknames, which a lot of times cults will do that too. A lot of times they'll call their leader by something. Of course, I'm on the spot and I can't think off the top of their head. Their leader always has some kind of special devotion name or something like that. And they do that with other members of the cult as well. So again, another strong connection for cult. What I wanted to dive into is we saw Lori kind of spiral really, really quickly. She went from this amazing, devoted mom to this, I'm sorry for lack of better terms, completely unhinged woman that's believing in possessions and evil spirits and she's a deity and all of this stuff. So I wanted to look in her background, see if she had any other cult-like connections or any mental health connections. And again, I'm not trying to justify anything that these two monsters did. Not at all. There is no justification. There is no excuse for it. None at all. My mind just always wants to know the why. My mind wants to make sense of this. And the worst thing about it is there is no sense to this. And looking back on Lori's mental health, we did see that when Charles went to file for that divorce you had mentioned, and he stated he had feared for his life because if he got in the way of Lori's belief and mission, he was afraid she would harm him. So he later halted those divorce proceedings, and he stated to the police, and this is on record, that Charles said, quote unquote, this time she's psychologically, she's gone. Something's happened to her. But this was still in 2018, and there wasn't anything before that. She was somewhat religious. She did start reading Chad's books, got deeper into Chad, followed Chad. But before that, everything seemed pretty normal. Question is, the hardest thing to prove, did Lori really believe all this? All these things she was saying, all these things that Chad was apparently telling her, all of these things she was following, did Chad believe all this? Was Lori just pretending to please Chad? Or was Chad manipulating her? Because I read a lot about that, and you had even mentioned that all of this wild stuff was Chad's idea, and Chad was putting it in her head and was manipulating her to believe her and to do all this. Or was Lori just using this as a wild excuse to murder those sweet kids, her husband, and Tammy? Still questioning all of it. But if Lori and Chad believed all this craziness, it is considered religious extremism because she is so far from the traditional Mormon teachings, and she is kind of starting to lean into that cult side. It does seem like she is trying to form a cult, as she is a deity. She's trying to gather all these people. She had everybody living in one place in those apartments, which kind of makes a compound. She started isolating people. They had those secret little Zoom meetings. They had those secret little nicknames for each other. Certain people were allowed to hear things, were allowed to do and say things, while others weren't. She wouldn't explain, after a while, she wouldn't explain a lot of what her religious following was, just that people were possessed and they were bad. So
I have a question for you. I don't know if
yeah,
you looked into it or not. The names that she gave the demons and her husband, are they relevant somehow? Do the names mean
I
anything? Do we know?
I looked at I looked at some of them, and I couldn't find any direct meaning behind them,
Hmm.
but some of them sound similar, like in connotation, in syllables, to like old Christian Old Testament evil demons that are mentioned, but none of them are like an exact name. But
Gotcha.
I at least could see the relation.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like there's something, I don't know, something with the names.
Yeah, I would love to dig a lot more into that too, to see what the connection was with those names.
Ooh,
Because
I
some of the
got
names,
I've got the meaning of Hiplos.
What is
If
it?
yeah,
I'm
that
even
was,
saying it right, I don't even know if I'm saying it right. Hiplos means elapse or loose, but if you want to like get into like different meanings, it also means to grant freedom to or free from confinement, release from a spell.
yeah, and I can't remember the exact name, but there was, I'm sure somebody out there is going to know the name of the demon that releases the hounds of hell. And it was similar to the name of Hiplos.
Oh, yeah. So they're definitely playing on that then.
Yeah, I think so. And I wish I had a lot more time to look into all of that, because I could
Yeah.
fall down a whole nother rabbit hole on
Yeah.
that.
That's a whole different thing for sure.
Yeah,
Ramsey? Is that what you're thinking of?
no, it wasn't Ramsey. As far as Chad goes, looking back with as much information I could find, and up until this point, I couldn't find any kind of like mental health diagnoses or anything like that. If Lori and Chad did genuinely believe all this to me kind of sounds delusional ideas, auditory hallucinations, because they're talking about they hear the voice of, their God speaking to them, which leads me more to believe that they had a pretty significant mental health concern. And when there is that pretty significant mental health concern, that's when the people start getting that real religious extremism and more of that stuff than somebody just being some random religious fanatic. So keep that in mind with those delusions and the auditory hallucinations. Yeah, again with Chad, all the way up until now, all of Chad's kids still defend Chad, and their belief is that their father would not have done something like this, and that Lori was the mastermind and the manipulator.
They're just protecting their dad.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I can see that too, and I understand that too. And so the Chad side still kind of confuses me a bit, because it seems like he went pretty silent and is just really trying to blame Lori, and Chad's side of the family is saying Lori was the manipulator. And Lori does seem like she's a bit more of the manipulator, strong type. So that's where I'm kind of on the fence. So then I really tried to do a deep dive into Lori to see if Lori had a history of the types of thoughts and behaviors or mental health concerns prior to Chad. Because they said that in, what was it, 2018, Lori started reading all of Chad's books and stuff, and she started getting into that belief. And then once she met Chad, then they really started spiraling into that belief. And she turned in this completely opposite person from what she was reported to have been before. Remember, she was that great, awesome mom. And then now all of a sudden her kids are basically evil. So that all started about around the time she met Chad. And in 2018, her friends and family even mentioned there was massive changes in her demeanor and behavior. This kind of makes me discredit the side that she did have some kind of significant mental health concern, because if you have a significant mental health concern, it doesn't really just pop up out of the blue and completely change you like that. It just doesn't appear out of nowhere with no signs, no nothing. And, is kind of, I don't want to say late in life, because then technically we're all late in life, but as late in life and Lori was, it's just statistically doesn't happen really. Here
Yeah,
with Chad and Lori, they get so far beyond the Mormon that it's not even considered Mormon anymore. There's like almost no link to Mormonism.
that's true. And they have like different levels of light and all this stuff with it. That's different.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
different.
And so that's where I kind of I got away from the religious fanaticism, religious extremism. I'm still kind of iffy on the cult, and the only reason I'm leaning away from the cult is the mental health. And we talked about that 10 months that she had spent in the Idaho mental health facility. Her competency was restored. She went back to court. However, she refused to publicly disclose her diagnosis from the Idaho facility. She did have a mental health diagnosis. And that mental health diagnosis was later revealed by Newsweek and Fox, saying that she was diagnosed with a delusional disorder and an unspecified personality disorder.
Oh,
Yeah. So you remember when I mentioned back a little bit, I was starting to get a little concerned about the delusions and the auditory hallucinations. So
yeah.
did that mental health issue kind of lead her into maybe trying to start a cult? Very possible. I can
Do
at
you
least,
think, though, she was like actively seeking out to start a cult? I don't even know that that was the means behind this, you know? Like the more you talk about this and the more that you explain the mental aspect of it and her incompetency and things like that, it almost seems like she was just rallying to be with Chad and to just have this relationship where no one else was involved but her and Chad.
yeah.
You know?
I really don't believe that she cognitively was like, I'm gonna start this cult, this group of people. I think that somewhere in her mind she believed all this stuff, and she wanted people to believe her, but not in the sense of believe to follow me. It's like believe that I know that this is happening. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
You talked about in 2024, a judge ruled that Lori would need to undergo another psych eval before her proceedings were to continue. The judge asked Lori in 2024 if she had ever been found incompetent to stand trial. And Lori said, no, not to my understanding. My understanding was the judge did the same thing you did and an abundance of caution, and I came out to be competent. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. I found a Reddit post, and I don't know if this Reddit post is true, but it made a lot of sense to me. And so the OP states that they were in a psychiatric hospital with Lori and got to know her really well. They said, Lori is not some kind of victim who is being manipulated by Chad, like they have seen many people try to say. She had her own crazy beliefs and knew exactly what she was doing at all times. She was very competent in the sense that she knew right from wrong, she knew the systems of the world, and she knew social norms and how to behave. That's exactly like we were explaining with competency. So the OP states, compared to all the other patients in the psychiatric hospital, Lori seemed like the most normal and sane person there, even more so than some of the staff members. She rationalized her behavior in killing them quite easily. In her mind, they were no longer the kids. Her two kids were stuck in limbo. The people who were inhabiting their bodies were dark, evil, fallen angels. Nothing more, nothing less. She wasn't killing her kids. At no point did she see in her mind that she was killing her kids. She was killing the evil angels who were hell-bent on destroying her mission and the world. In Lori's mind, she was saving her children because when the body gets killed, the kids can get out of limbo. In her mind, she saved those children from an existence of perpetual nothingness, all while being conscious of what she was doing. That's how she rationalized killing them. And she full well believed every single word she said.
I believe that because, like I said before, I think she believed everything she said.
I think she
I-
did too.
Hmm.
I would love to see her on a lie detector because I
Yeah.
would love to see if she passes it with how delusional she is.
Yeah.
Because that is a thing. I mean, that happens. That can totally happen.
What
Yeah.
about if Lori and Chad are just happen to be the same personality type who just happen to meet up because they both have the same ideology and they fed off each other?
Ooh, I
You
get into
know,
that too.
right. And Nyoka, I would like to believe there's somebody out there for me with, the same morals and values that I have too, but where I stand on that. I mean, it just seems so odd that he and I'm pointing the finger at him, obviously, that he could drive her so far into thinking that, they were really truly meant to be together and that it's just supposed to be them and that's it.
They
Living this.
manipulated each other,
Yes.
probably. She read his
Yes.
books. She knew what kind of person he was. She was the same way. I just feel like they're probably one and the same.
Yeah. Well, remember, Megan, when you were talking about when she had spoke for herself in court and she made it sound like the children were proud of her and what they understood. Yeah, this leads back to this. So I kind of believe what this OP is saying. It makes sense.
It really does.
Yeah.
100%. It
Mhm.
fits. It
Yeah.
fits.
Okay. Oh, also where you were talking about the kind of the matching personalities and they fed off of and manipulated each other.
Hmm.
A different spin on this situation that I had even read about, which I wish I had time to dive into a little bit more too, was a doctoral student in counseling psychology stated that this could have been a state of folie à deux. Have
Hmm.
you guys heard about that?
No,
Mhm.
I haven't. What
So,
it was that?
folie à deux is basically just like the fault of two, and which is a shared psychosis or shared delusional disorder.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah. And this is a real thing. Lori was diagnosed with that delusional disorder and
Mhm.
an unspecified personality disorder. I don't know what the personality disorder is. I can only make assumptions without
Right.
kind of knowing more about her. And since Chad's family believes this was all by the hands and coercion of Lori, the folie à deux is an intriguing insight.
That's an interesting take.
Yeah. So now we've got a couple of different theories. Again, I don't want people to think that we're trying to make an excuse for it. We're not.
No, no.
I just want to understand it. Like, I want to know why.
I just love psychology.
Yeah, so do I. So do I.
Yeah.
And I don't think that any type of mental health disorder or anything like that is ever an excuse for
Mm-mm.
the disgusting thing these two people did.
Right.
But I think that when psychologists and forensic psychologists study things like that, maybe we can understand a little bit more about how this happened so we can prevent it from happening. So we can
Right.
see it a little bit better in the future to stop things like this from happening. And I think that's a lot of reason why I love to dig into stuff like this, as horrible as it is. I think that maybe we can find some kind of good in it eventually.
Yeah.
So we've got the theory of the cult. We've got the theory of, Chad just manipulating her. We got the Folly Ado. What else do we have? We had one more, didn't we?
Yeah, where they're one and the same. I think they
Yeah.
just manipulated each other. They both have big egos. They both are impressionable.
Yeah. So now that we went into all of that, like, do you think it's a cult?
Um, maybe they say that because it's like just the like group think kind of thing, but
Yeah.
they don't really talk about anyone else in this cult. It only surrounds them too. Like everything is about them. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Because when you think about a cult, a I hate to say a good example, but you know what I mean. A good
Yeah.
example of a cult would be like Waco. You know the story of
Yes.
Waco, right? And the Branch Davidian.
Hmm.
That is a really good example and something to kind of compare it to. Was Lori maybe in the beginning steps of creating a cult kind of inadvertently and unknowingly?
Possibly.
Possibly, but did it ever reach the actual cult? No. I think that the cult got slapped onto her name because,
Hmm.
unfortunately, like I said, not speaking ill of the Mormon community, but a lot of people just automatically assume without the education of what a cult is or the Mormon community that the Mormon community is a cult. And I think that's just how she got the cult thing. And like I
Yeah.
said, there's nothing wrong with religion. There's nothing wrong with being a doomsday prepper.
Right. But it does
Okay.
seem like everything was about them too, and not a group of people. Where
Yeah.
usually it would be a group of people participating. A group of people are mentioned where it's them too and what benefits their lives.
Yeah.
I agree. However, you had Pulowski, you had Gibb at one point in time was kind of in on it too. You had other players that believed just as much of this as they did. But again, like Nyoka's saying, it was all to just Chad or Lori's benefit. Anything that they were talking about, anything that they discussed was for Lori and Chad to come together.
Yeah, I think they just used those people. They
I agree.
they played a part in their story.
Yep.
Yeah. Did they really truly believe this at the core of their being like Lori did?
Right.
Or was it something they're kind of like, this it kind of makes sense. I'll go along with it.
They could have been the people that just want to belong with
Hmm.
something,
Mhm.
Yeah, because we see a lot of times there's people that will fall into something and follow along with something as, for that feeling
a
of
community.
community and being accepted and being a part of something. And then once they're in it, they're like, how did I end up in this? Like, this is not right.
Yeah.
And I'm not faulting those people. I'm just kind of explaining.
No,
Um,
I totally agree.
I'm really sticking with the delusional disorders and
I
possibly the
agree.
folie à deux.
Yeah, makes sense.
Totally makes sense.
It's
I would love
interesting.
I would love to dig into that quite a bit more, maybe after we get the finalness on this whole trial and everything, and see what more I can find out, and see if I can build a pretty solid theory.
I would love to hear their podcast. I would love to be able to dig and find that. I would love to be able to find any content, not that was nothing that was given in trial. I want to
Yeah.
find it just raw.
Yeah, because I think you'll get a lot of sense of their personality and their beliefs from their voice and their explanations. Because as you know, Megan, we're losing a lot by only getting what is being published in the news and online, and all of that can
Hmm.
be misconstrued and fanaticized too.
Exactly.
So
If we can
yeah,
get the couple to like hate each other, then we can learn the truth.
there you go. Yeah. Okay, we need to work on that.
They would defend themselves to the end.
Yeah. That's all I got on that. Did you guys like have
I
any
found it
questions?
interesting. No, I don't know. I tend to ask along the way, but I think it's fascinating. I would love to know what the listeners think. Do you think it was a cult? Do you think one of them was manipulating the other? I'd love to know.
Yeah, I would
Too.
love to hear, what other people that are, go down this psychology rabbit hole have to think too, you know, whether they agree with the cult, they agree with the follow do, the delusional disorders. Yeah.
They had a lot of psychiatric individuals that were on there, a lot of psychiatric experts that, you know, you can just find the random interviews, whether they were on the news or whatever, about this case. But again, they had no tie to either individual. It was just somebody random that they were like,
Yeah.
hey, do you want to be on the show? But at the same time, you're actually getting an expert's opinion on it too. But they had like the same type of outcome with this as well.
So did those psychiatrists and psychologists, did they have the chance to actually assess Chad and Lori, or are they kind of doing what we've got and giving our
Exactly.
opinion?
What we are
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah. Maybe one day I'll be one of those big psychologists in the courtroom. That'll be cool.
That would be
That would be
so cool.
so cool. Yeah.
Look at Megan glowing with
I know.
pride.
Like, please do that.
I love it. What a great episode.
It definitely was, it was brutal because even though I had the one timeline that pretty much spelled out everything, it wasn't all spelled out. I mean, there are still rabbit holes we could go down. I mean, there's just so much. There is so much to this. And I cannot believe how many lives were lost in this either.
Horrible.
Horrible.
Those victim impact statements, like it already hurt my heart, but when you got to those victim impact statements and you see the ripple of what Lori and Chad really did to not just those kids and their husband and wife, but the whole family and possibly for a couple generations too. Look, I have people bumps.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
just, oh, that hurts my heart so much hearing
Yeah.
that.
We need to mark our calendars, follow Court TV or whoever's going to like cover this and figure out what's happening.
31st. March 31st is the next one.
Yeah.
If you guys do come up with a case in the future that I really can go more in depth with the cult psychology, I would love to do that for you. And I hate to burst the bubble there, Nyoka.
No, that would be great. I haven't covered as many cult things as I like to, and I think because it kind of intimidates me because it's always like this huge, huge thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I covered a sex cult last year. It was interesting. I forget what the cult is called though. It was a good one though.
I know I heard that one because I've only not heard the last episode. I heard all the other ones. And I highly recommend everybody just starting from the beginning of the podcast and listening to them all the way up until now because it's you guys did a great job of covering all the cases, and then you get a really feel for the style, and you can even see you guys progress too. It's great.
I'm so glad you said that because I felt like that too. Like you can tell the difference as time moves on.
And
now
I don't watch
we're
TV.
over 100 episodes in.
Yeah, I don't watch TV. I only listen to podcasts like all the time. Any chance that I have on, I have a podcast.
Yeah, you'll definitely have to come back on. We'll have to cover another cult or something. Have you on?
Well, you figure psychology is embedded in everything that we talk about. So
yeah,
the door is always open, Mandy. Come on in.
Yeah.
Don't say that because I will bust in like the Kool-Aid man. Ooh, yeah. You know
Well, we will be having you on another episode very soon.
Yeah.
I know that much. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that.
Speaking of the Kool-Aid.
Yes. Don't drink it. I mean, what?
It actually wasn't Kool-Aid. It was Flavor Aid.
Flavor Aid.
Yeah, it wasn't Kool-Aid.
That's disappointing.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Thank you guys for doing this deep dive that I did not do. So thanks for...
You didn't need to. It was my turn.
You were like, I wrote 75 pages. And Mandy's like, I have 47. And I'm like, I have nothing. Because you guys wrote the novel.
It's okay.
All right. So I guess we'll give this a wrap up and go ahead and close this out until next time. So, goodbye.
Goodbye, everybody.